Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment. So Kyle, did you know that the US Senate is 90% white?
So
don't you think there's a reason for that? Some kind of systemic discrimination?
Oh, no, it's not that. That's not a thing.
Then what could it be? There has to be a reason for this.
I mean, maybe they just don't work hard.
Yeah, think carefully about how you word your racism.
I'm Kyle.
I'm Kira.
And once again, I was the belligerent, terrible human being in this skit.
Yes.
But I was going to open up with this anyway. I am a Caucasian man, so if I have any burden at all, it's probably playing the racist in our opening skit.
I appreciate it.
We're going to be talking about racial representation in all things, especially media. Mm-hmm. And as a Caucasian person, I don't have as much personal experience with this. But I still think it's something everyone should talk about. So that's why we wanted to do this.
Yeah, I agree, because it's very important. Like we were talking about in the skit, the Senate is 90% white. And obviously, it's because of systemic discrimination.
Well, and if you don't think that, the only other answer is that there's something intrinsically wrong with certain individuals of a certain demographic, i.e. racism.
Yeah, there's no other explanation for it other than racism.
Either you think it's their fault or it's someone else's fault, which is systemic discrimination. Mm-hmm. That there's some other force out there holding people back. Mm-hmm. And it's not some other mysterious force, it's other people.
Yeah.
And this was true for the Senate, but it's also true in media. Mm-hmm. Oh, you should tell people your background in addition to mine, Kira.
Oh, I'm Puerto Rican, but I really identify with the Latinx community, or however you say that. But,
I think that term is still catching on, and it's mostly because of the gender divide between Latino and Latina.
Yeah. But, yeah. And, of course, I'm a woman, so, yeah, that too.
I think Spanish is a very gendered language.
Yes, it is. I don't really like Spanish that much. I can understand it pretty well, pretty decently, because I've been around it a lot, but I suck at speaking it.
Yeah, with English, we just have to mostly be concerned about pronouns and a few alternate nouns. Mm-hmm. But that's just English. We're talking about representation of actual people.
Yeah.
So, we care a lot about video games, so we decided to crunch some numbers because this kind of brought us back to our very first episode of 4 Players featuring the girl.
Oh, yes.
Which was one of our ones talking about gender discrimination, but we had a few covering different aspects of that. And maybe we could do the same thing with race one day, but we just wanted to cover it broadly, at least at first. Mm-hmm. So we looked at the most popular games, like the top 50 or so, and wanted to know, do any of these feature non-Caucasian characters?
Yeah, the numbers aren't good.
Yeah, because we did the same thing before, although the list has changed. Some of the places have switched around. Mm-hmm. I was kind of surprised Fortnite was not up there, but then Kira reminded me, you don't pay for that game, it's top selling games.
Yeah, if you're going by top selling games, then yeah, of course it wouldn't be up there. But if you go by most downloaded, then it's probably up there.
I don't know where that statistic would be. I also feel like that statistic is misleading, because what about games before a time they were downloaded?
Oh, fair enough.
You could maybe say owned copies, but then what's an owned copy? It's complicated. Mm-hmm. Let's just go by money made. Because that's what the companies care about, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of games... Let's see, we have 100% here. Like, imagine we got a pie chart. Oh, I guess we'll actually probably put this image attached to the episode.
Probably.
So look at that. About 20% of them are none. These are games like Tetris that don't have an obvious gender to the player character. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about like characters you get to actually play as, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sorry. About 29% of the games had mix sorry, did I say genders?
Yeah, have mixed race.
Sorry, I had the first episode in my mind. Yes, race.
And that basically just means that you can play as either race or several races.
Yes, however, almost all of the mixed ones, the ones that have characters of a multitude of races, only do so because of a character customization system.
Yeah, that's true, actually. So, and even then, most of the options are still white.
And again, like we discussed with genders, a character customization system is good, but it's not progressive. It's just neutral.
Because you're just allowing them the options. And oftentimes, like I said, it's just they don't even give you that many other options, like non-white options.
Well, let's get to the other numbers on this list. So about 16% are what we called anime. And the reason we wanted to separate this, maybe we could talk about this for a little bit, but the anime style, whether in actual anime or within games or other media, tends to be drawn in such a way that maybe we mentioned this on our Japanese animation podcast, but
maybe,
or that episode, because you would say they're Asian based on the fact that it's made in Japan and there's some characters meant to be Japanese, but oftentimes the characters don't actually live in our world. And you just have to look at them to be able to tell they have very light skin. When they appear in North America or Europe, a lot of people interpret them as being Caucasian. And because of the vague way that this is drawn, there's kind of an overlap, blurring of lines there.
Yeah, because they look Caucasian, but I mean, technically they're supposed to be Japanese. Even
though actual Japanese people do not have that light of a skin most of the time.
Yeah, they don't quite look like that.
Right. So we decided to just kind of set that in its own problematic category. Not sure what to do with that, but I'll say this for what it's worth. There is a concerted effort most of the time to give them really light skin. They may not be Caucasian technically, but they're not exactly Asian either.
Yeah.
If you have a story like Death Note, right, where they explicitly have Japanese names, it takes place in Japan, you can be like, okay, yeah, they're Japanese. They're still very light skinned.
Yeah, and they still look very Caucasian because of the art style.
Right.
They're like, there's no features you can say look Japanese.
Yeah, anime is really its own kind of style. So anyway, we're not going to spend the whole episode touching on that, but that is something we noticed on the list. We set it aside in its own category. The next category we wanted to talk about was the Caucasian category. These are games which exclusively had Caucasian characters, no playable characters of any other race. This accounted for 33% of the top 50 games.
Yep. And that's terrible because
that's a third.
That's a third on its own. And if you add the anime because, technically they look Caucasian, that's like half.
Yeah, so that's like 49%.
Yeah, that's like half.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the first one we've even mentioned that's a singular ethnicity or race. Right? The other ones were like nun and mix and anime, which were more nuanced things.
Yep.
But if you're gonna go of just having an exclusive race, Caucasian's the way to go, apparently.
Yeah.
That's what the top 50 tells us.
Yeah.
There is one more category we need to go over. There was one single game in the top 50 that we saw that had exclusively characters from a race besides Caucasian.
Yep.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas has a single African-American playable character who is, by the way, a gangster.
That doesn't perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
It does, though.
Exactly.
So
I was being sarcastic.
So yeah, we wrote up these numbers to try to make a point, but it was just so glaringly obvious. It was almost like it was a waste of time to even bother. It's like, obviously, guys, there's racial discrimination through our media representation.
And it's the same way with even new games coming out. I mean, we're trying to get better, but yeah, I would still say that it's still a problem. Yeah,
we didn't crunch the numbers on E3 2018 just mostly because we were in a rush for this episode. But, this kind of proves the point out of the water, I think.
Yeah.
And all it takes is looking around. I mean, we did an episode on E3 2018. Can you even literally remember a character that wasn't Caucasian? Or an animal? Or a robot? There's more robots than there are non-Caucasian characters.
That girl Ellie kisses wasn't white, I believe.
What game?
The Last of Us, Ellie.
I don't...
The Last of Us 2.
No, The Last of Us only had Caucasian characters.
No, that girl. She kisses in the trailer.
I don't remember what ethnicity she was.
I don't think she was white. But yeah, that's literally the only even faintest glimmer I can think of. Oh, wait. There was that game that took place in like feudal Japan or during a war.
Okay, so there might have been some anime characters?
Yeah. No, they were Japanese. Or Chinese.
Oh, because there's that one really realistic one. Okay, so yeah, there were a few, I guess, but still predominantly Caucasian.
Yeah, there were a lot. That scary one that we liked with the weird fetus monsters was the main character was white.
Yes, very.
Yeah.
So were any of the other characters in the trailers.
Yeah.
It literally didn't even show a non-Caucasian person.
Yeah.
It's also weird because that one's made in Japan.
Was it?
Well, I know the creator is Japanese.
Yeah, that is
He
weird.
used to make Metal Gear.
Well, I think they got a famous person to be the main character in that game.
Yeah, because it's the same actor from The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add this. This might be a little controversial for me to say. But I feel like a lot of the times when it comes to racial representation, after Caucasians, the minority group that tends to fare the best is people that are Asian. Mm-hmm. And I say that because when it comes to at least American stereotypes of different races, most of the stereotypes for Asian people tend to be positive stereotypes, which are still stereotypes.
Yeah, that's like benevolent racism.
Exactly. But I think it's especially true when talking about video games because so many of them are made in Japan. That results in a lot of the anime stuff we talked about. But like you just mentioned, every once in a while, an actual Asian character comes through. Mm-hmm. So that's something, but still, we're in a heap of problems here. And, because we also talked about representation of women, right?
Yeah.
So because of this, African-American women are like shiny Pokemon. They're only one out of 8,192.
That's a great analogy.
Of course, this is not in reality.
Mm-hmm,
but
of course not.
If you looked at media, that's how it would seem.
Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous.
Okay, where should we pivot next to on this conversation?
Let's talk about other kinds of media. And why representation is important.
I mean, you look at the Avengers.
What do you... Oh, yeah, they're mostly white men.
Yeah, wasn't it all Caucasian people until Black Panther
showed up?
Actually, no. They had 2 African-American sidekicks before that.
Oh, yeah.
Iron Man.
Sam and Rhodes.
Iron Man had the War Machine as his sidekick, and Captain America had Falcon as his sidekick. Because, all African-American people have to be the sidekicks, apparently.
Yeah.
Says Disney. Thank you, Disney.
And then Black Panther came out, and we got an actual African-American hero. That movie was the best because, the cast was majority African-American. Because it took place in Africa, which rarely happens.
Well, the cast was mostly of African descent. They weren't all American.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I know some of them were actual African, some of them were African Britain, and probably other things.
All right, but yeah, that's it. Crazy because nobody ever makes a movie set in Africa and then has all the main characters actually be African.
Did you know that Trevor Noah from The Daily Show was in that movie in Black Panther?
What?
Yes.
What?
He was a cameo.
Where?
He did the voice for the automation systems in Wakanda.
Oh.
So when the voice is going shield capacity at 50%, that was Trevor Noah.
Oh my god, that's so cool. I did not know that.
Yep.
That's really cool.
He didn't even have to fake an African accent because he's actually from South Africa.
Yeah.
So he just did his, I guess you say native accent. So we should talk about either more problems with representation or why this is important or the benefits of having representation.
I think we
Your choice, Kira.
we should talk about more, like, in TV shows and stuff, a lot of the time.
So we're going to pick just another medium?
Yes. Because, like, in TV shows, there are a lot more stereotypes. And there are...
I think the stereotypes are pretty pervasive through all media. I mean, are you thinking of some particular examples?
Well, it's weird with TV shows because sometimes they will have TV shows where it's a black cast. Like, gosh, let me think. Everybody Hates Chris. The main characters in that show are all African American. And the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had a lot of African American people.
Well, what are the stereotypes?
In those movies, they stereotype those characters a lot as, like, you know, gangsters or, you know, like the typical stereotypes. Like they make them more caricatures than actual people, actual characters.
I don't know. I think Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was really going against that, though, by having an affluent African-American family.
Well, yes, but for example, in Everybody Hates Chris, it was a lot of the
I never
stereotypes.
watched that show.
Yeah, but it was a lot of the stereotypes of growing up in an African-American household. And to be fair, it was Chris Rock who was in that show, so he was probably pulling from his actual experiences, but still.
Is Chris Rock cool or is he problematic?
I don't know.
Is he progressive or not?
He's a comedian, and he's African-American.
That doesn't tell you the full picture. There's some really problematic comedians out there.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of comedians as telling this truth and being somehow, you know, the greater good. But sometimes that truth is actually progressive and takes us to the next century. Sometimes it's them clinging on to the past and just calling racism the truth. Just saying it how it is. Like, I mean, at the beginning when I was being all belligerent in our skit, you could argue that I was just saying it how it was. No, I was denying the facts.
Yeah.
Oh, I should mention, by the way, I know we're talking about African American a lot. We're kind of singling out that minority race in America, although it's the largest one, right?
As far as I know, yes.
Second under Caucasian.
Yes.
Because of slavery. Sorry, I didn't need to whisper that. But I just wanted to say, you know, I'm Caucasian, so I'm trying to word myself carefully here. If I end up messing up, I apologize. Feel free to call me out on it. You know what, though? I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of them are run by Caucasian hosts. But there's this one podcast I listen to that really talks about a lot of the African American experience within the entertainment industry. It's called Culture Kings. So if you guys want to listen to that and actually hear it from you know, their mouths, the hosts there are great. Go listen to that one. Although they do have like 100 times the amount of listeners that we have, so please don't leave us.
They're hilarious. Actually, I want to talk about one thing they talked about. Remember that joke they talked about? Oh, well, it wasn't a joke. How they talked about the one white comedian friend of theirs who called him and asked him if it was okay if he used the emoji face thing, whatever it is, of Barack Obama while doing an impression of Barack Obama, and he was white. And it's just like, if you have to ask, no.
I think that tangent would be a good segue into our next topic, considering Halloween. Considering Halloween just passed, and apparently, I don't want to say it.
What?
Dressing up as African American people is all the rage these days.
Oh, I see.
Amongst Caucasian people, amongst racist people.
Yeah, that's terrible. The thing is, you can't do blackface. Just don't do it. Don't, because it's terrible. You may not know the history behind it, but people did it in these so-called minstrel shows to perpetuate stereotypes and make fun of black people. And that's all it was ever used for. It wasn't used for anything in drama or anything even remotely good, ever. It was literally just used to perpetuate stereotypes and make fun of black people.
Yeah, see, the people that would do that would often purport, or they would respond by saying, oh, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. There's nothing inherently wrong in this. But that's like going to someone with a peanut allergy and just holding a peanut butter jelly sandwich around saying, like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just holding it. You know, it's like not you're purposefully doing it, or maybe possibly even unaware, but it's still kind of subconsciously evil of doing it and ignoring the reason it's bad, which is, like you said, it's the history. You know,
it's the same reason why why non-African American people aren't allowed to say the N-word. They paid for it with blood and sweat. And it's theirs.
This is why, you know, it's cultural appropriation to do that, right?
Yeah.
And if you do it with anyone, doesn't matter if it's African American, Asian, Native American, it's problematic. However, you'll notice that if you try to do that and pretend to be a Caucasian person, that is the one type of, I guess you have cultural appropriation quotes, that most people are at least kind of okay with. And the reason is because that ethnicity, that race, has never been systematically subjugated.
Yeah.
At least not based on their race. You know? Theoretically, I think we could possibly one day live in some type of utopia where all type of systematic discrimination has been very hard fought and purged from the system, right? I think we could get to that point. It would be very hard and it would require maintenance to keep it that way, right? But theoretically, we could get to that. And then maybe once we were at that place for a couple centuries, we might be able to be like, oh, we can dress up as any race or whoever we want without having to feel like we're offending someone. That's not the world we live in, though.
No,
that is not the present era. And I mean, not only is, you know, things like slavery still very fresh in some families' minds, right? But so is the civil rights movement, which wasn't even like 40 years ago.
Yeah, and did you know that actually this is something you probably never thought about, but because of slavery, a lot of African American people have family in Africa that they just will never know about. And even in America, they might have family that they just don't know about because they were traded and sold all over. And
That's a good point.
Yeah, because they basically lost their culture and lost their families sometimes, you know?
Right. We probably do need to tie this back to media, though, considering the point of our podcast.
Yes. By the way, did you know that dressing up as Asian is it's called yellow face?
Yeah, there's offensive terms for each of the colors. I don't like saying them, though, because that term you just said might be considered offensive.
I'm not sure.
I think it's one of those things that the name for it is kind of offensive, but the act itself is also offensive.
Yeah.
And so since the act is more offensive if you're calling someone out and that's the only word to use, I guess you can give it a pass. But I'm not going to say that.
Because people dress up like geishas and stuff like that, or they will steal from those cultures for...
Just so you know, geisha is not a prostitute.
No, they're not.
A geisha
they're
is like
performers and entertainers.
Like a geisha is like essentially the Japanese equivalent of like a pop star or a belly dancer or some type of performer, really. It's just they don't get up as much.
But yeah, you see people dress up as geishas, or like even in fashion shows and stuff, they will steal from those cultures.
Oh, that happens with a lot of celebrities, pop singers in America will try to appropriate stuff.
Yeah, they'll just take an aesthetic and use it when they're not even from that culture.
I want to bring it back around to video games. Fallout is a game we enjoy very much, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I really hate is the lack of diversity in that game.
Oh, yeah, because almost every character is Caucasian.
They try to vary it up sometimes, which is more than what I think most games do. But it's still wholly lacking when you consider the fact that almost every companion that you ever get in any of the Fallout games, if they're human, they're probably Caucasian.
You know something that might explain that, though? I feel like because of the nature of our system and because of how things work, that the reason that mostly Caucasian people survived or continued on after the apocalypse was because non-white people were the first ones to die, were the first ones to
That's an interesting theory, but
they're the first ones rejected to get into vaults, maybe?
No, but you have to keep in mind, in the Fallout world, supposedly, even though they didn't have a civil rights movement, they somehow got beyond racism. It's never made clear how that happened. I would wager it's a lie. They never got beyond racism. They just pretended that they did. And it was only when the war happened that really that racism was scrubbed out because everyone died with it. But maybe there's still lingering after effects. However, I still challenge you on that because I feel like the real reason that it's happening has nothing to do with the game itself, nothing in universe. The reason that happens is because in the United States of America, a Caucasian man is the default human being.
And that's wrong.
Not only does that show you that we think of Caucasian as the default and most superior race, in the American psyche, right? But it also is an example of the patriarchy because, women and men are half and half. So why is male always the default?
Yep.
Well, it's because they've historically ruled things.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you had a stat about our Senate, or was it just the Senate or Congress in the United States?
It's Congress in general.
Oh.
The U.S. Congress is only 19% women.
When it should be 50 if it represented the people.
Yeah, and not even that, but I bet you that statistic is worse in almost every other department or facet of government. This is just Congress. This is just the people that even get elected. Imagine how White House staffers and interns in the White House all white over how predominantly white they all are.
It'd be interesting to see a breakdown of all those numbers, but I don't know where we would get them or even if they exist.
Yeah, I suppose. I actually saw a picture of the new set of White House interns. Almost every single one of them was Caucasian.
Well, considering the administration, I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah, that's true.
That's their favorite type of person. The default. The vanilla. That's not offensive, is it?
No, because you're talking about Caucasian people.
Again, the reason that it's pretty much okay, like reverse racism isn't a thing.
No, it is not.
It's a made-up term, just like a reverse harem. It doesn't exist.
Because, you could tell your boss that they're a jerk and they can fire you and you'll be out on your ass without a job. But if your boss tells you you're a jerk, you kind of just have to take it if you want to stay in that job. The main thing is power.
Yeah, it's the power dynamic.
Yes.
That's why whenever a boss, is doing something inappropriate with one of their underlings, it's never the underling's fault. It's the boss because the boss had the power in that dynamic. They chose when it started, they could choose when it ended. The underling has less power. You might be like, well, they could just walk away. Yeah, and lose their job, i.e. make a sacrifice, i.e. they don't have power. And the same thing goes with race. That's why there are many terms that's no, you cannot call minorities that, right? And there's many terms where it's yeah, sure, go ahead and call a Caucasian that person. No one really cares, except some Caucasian people that go oh, well, that's racism. You don't even know what racism is.
Yeah. And that's just how it is.
Also, fun fact, a reverse harem is just called a harem. It's just a harem either way. It doesn't matter the gender.
Okay. I did not know that.
Pokemon made that mistake.
Oh, really?
If we ever talk about Salazzle one day on a Pokemon episode...
All right, fine.
You're going to have it. You're going to hear me go at
it. Okay, then.
But I just remember... I don't mean to bring up Fallout again, but I really just wanted an African-American female companion. Because I really...
there aren't any.
Because with every companion, it's oh, you're a woman. Oh, you're of another ethnicity. But again, in Fallout, they act like ethnicity, or they act like demographic-based oppression, either by gender or by race. They act like it just doesn't exist anymore. And I understand how in the apocalypse things are a lot more even now, but that just to me seems unrealistic. And I apologize if this is a little controversial, but I'm going to propose this to you, Kira. I think from what I've seen in the world and from the people I've met, that an African American woman's existence, or actually probably a woman of any color besides Caucasian, right? Sorry, I don't know. Is that offensive to say color like that? Okay, sorry. Any minority woman is inherently living a life full of discrimination. And I think part of that is why an African American woman doesn't exist in so many games, because the very nature of having her existence means, oh, we're talking about discrimination here, which is unrealistic because that's not all that African American women go through. They can have living lives. What was that one movie we watched together?
Which one?
The one with the entire African female cast. African American, sorry.
It was Hidden Figures.
Okay, that one, sure, but I was thinking of the party one.
Oh, Girls Trip.
Yes. Those were both good movies.
Yes. Hidden Figures more than Girls Trip. But yeah, they're both really good movies.
Hidden Figures talked about the discrimination, but there was a lot of other stuff to it.
Yeah, like they talk, like their jobs was a lot of the focus of the movie too.
And Girls Trip, they didn't touch on that at all. They showed like one of them was really successful. The other ones had their own problems, right?
Yeah, they were people, not stereotypes.
And I find it really lacking from any video game, really. I literally can't think of one. I guess I could have searched for one. There's got to be an African American woman character out there somewhere, but I highly doubt she'd even be playable.
Star Paladin Cross is technically one.
Yeah, she was in Fallout 3.
Oh, and she was a companion too, so she technically counts, but she's literally the only one.
Honestly, I was thinking New Vegas and 4. I forgot about 3. But that's true. But I think one thing we should also talk about is how even when characters of other races, and like especially African American, appear in at least Western or American entertainment, oftentimes they do so only to be sidelined. Like I was talking about companions, but what I really would want is a playable character, right?
I see what you mean.
And not just one that's like a customizable character, because like we said, while
that's
there were a lot of...
That's the least you can do. That's the baseline
that's
standard.
That's the minimum.
Yeah, like at least let me choose that if I want to be that.
33% of games work exclusively Caucasian, so you can't tell me that we can't do that with some other ethnicities. But like, for example, Star Paladin Cross from Fallout 3, she was wearing her power armor almost all the time, so you can only see her face. That's how you would even know that she's African American. Also, you only get her as a companion at the end of the game.
Well, you only get her if you're good, too.
But at the end of the game. That's the only time when you get an opportunity.
Got her earlier.
No, you only meet her in game.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Because
she's at like a really high level location.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then there's just so many instances, so many shows where it's like, oh, look, there's an African American character. Oh, they're dead now.
Yep. That happens quite often.
Can you think of some examples for that?
Actually, you know what?
What?
I guess technically she's an alien, but it was obvious she was actually
are you talking about Doctor Who?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, in the second episode of Doctor Who, of the revived season, they're in the year 5 billion, and there's a character, Lady Jane, who is a tree, a sentient tree. But she's obviously played by an African Briton actress.
Yes.
And she gets set on fire and murdered. Oh, yeah, sorry, did you want to say that?
She gets turned to ash.
Spoilers, whoops. She appears on screen for like 10 minutes, so it's fine.
So, yeah, there we go. She shows up and then she dies, but all the Caucasian characters...
Exactly.
Yep. And I mean, for example, Doctor Who only just now finally decided to have a female doctor, and she's also white.
And the show's been out for over 50 years.
Yep.
But no, changing ethnicities during regeneration between doctors, oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
And Mario? The Mario franchise doesn't have any non-Caucasian characters.
Well, I mean, technically the Mario Bros are Italian,
That's
but
Caucasian?
yeah, that counts. I see what you mean. Yeah.
It doesn't count. That's what it is.
Yeah, all right.
In fact, I think you might almost be falling for a stereotype because I feel that there is a big stereotype, at least in America, maybe in Europe. Let me know, guys. But that Italians, because for Caucasians, they do have a slightly darker tint to their skin color on average. Mm-hmm. I think I'm correct in saying that.
Yeah, and they also often have black hair.
Okay. But so that makes them like the least Caucasian.
Yeah.
Which is dumb.
I'm descended from Italians.
Also Puerto Ricans.
Yeah, that's true.
Because Italian people colonized Puerto Rico? No, that doesn't make any sense.
No, it's just particularly my family, I can trace
some to Italian.
Yeah, back to Italian.
Huh, okay. But I think that might be more pervasive in America than in Europe, though, particularly because America hates immigrants until we need them. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, we hate immigrants. World War II, we need immigrants. Okay, we won World War II, now we hate them again.
Yeah.
But because you learn in history the different waves of immigrants, and one of the earliest waves was Irish people. Mm-hmm. So they're because from the potato famine. So Irish people, they were treated as terrible immigrants, even though they were Caucasian. Italian people went through the same thing. Mm-hmm. That's why you see a lot of New York like mafia imagery is still associated with Italians, which really is a stereotype. Mm-hmm. And that's not even to count all the stuff that happened when Japanese and Chinese people started coming in. We literally had laws on the book that were completely racist in America.
Of course. America was built on the backs of immigrants, and we also were very explicitly racist to everyone.
Yes.
And xenophobic. People
say, like, this is not America. It's like, no, this is America. Cue the song.
Like, I remember that song, Immigrants, We Get the Job Done?
Yes.
Well, there's a
line... Made by
line...
the same guy who made Hamilton, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But what a line in that song is really interesting because she calls immigrants America's ghostwriters.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's true because immigrants were America's ghostwriters. They're the ones that created America, and they don't get any of the credit for it.
I really want to say something, but it's not pertaining to media. Is it okay if I go off on the tangent, Kara?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not going to mention any names because I would get in trouble. Mm-hmm. But let's just say I was talking to some people the other day. Well, I wasn't really talking to them as so much as they were within my vicinity and I could overhear what they were saying. Mm-hmm. And they were talking about the influx of immigrants that's coming to the United States from Honduras currently. Mm-hmm. They referred to this as a caravan. And I was just like, there's no Brahmin in there. Mm-hmm. That's a Fallout reference. Mm-hmm. Sorry, comic relief. And they said that they wanted to kill them all. They said that the immigrants were trying to kill them. Keep in mind, the immigrants don't even have enough to feed themselves. Actually, they're not even immigrants. They're not even here yet. The aspiring immigrants, right? You know what this group of people suggested? They suggested getting shotguns and going out and committing genocide and murdering them.
Really?
Then when someone said, isn't that bad? They're like, okay, we'll just kneecap them.
Wow.
So you want to tell me that, like, oh, this isn't the America I knew or whatever? No, this is how it is.
This is America. This has always been America. This is literally like since fuckboy Christopher Columbus sailed over.
Can you believe that's still a holiday?
Yeah. Since that happened, we've always been incredibly racist and xenophobic, even to people who were already here before we even got here.
Oh, and if you don't believe us, just look up how we annexed Hawaii, how we dethroned the Queen, and how we took that place over with Caucasian missionaries, settlers, and plantation corporations. You'd think we would have learned our lesson the first time with the Native Americans. Nope, we still didn't learn our lesson with the Hawaiians.
Oh, please. Are you kidding me? America never learns its lesson, and we never will. Ever.
There was a long time when Rome...
learn anything.
There was a long time when Rome did not call itself an empire. It was just a country. Mm-hmm. But they were an empire for a long time before they actually started using the term Roman Empire.
Yep.
That's what we are. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's get back to media. Okay, we should talk about benefits. Like, why is it important that we have representation of other races? I know we've kind of touched on this idea before in other episodes, but I think it's important that we do it here.
Well,
I think this is really where you should speak and I should step back.
I very much appreciate that you understand that your role as an ally is to step back and not speak over marginalized voices.
Thank you for that very nuanced compliment. All right, mouth shut.
Well, I was going to say that personally, I get really excited and happy whenever I see Latina women in media because it's something I really identify with. And it's great to see people from that culture in media. And I know this is a bit of a tangent as well, but like I also get pretty excited whenever I see explicitly bi characters in media as well.
Did you mention women?
Yes.
So race, women, and orientation, or race, gender, and orientation.
Yes.
Yeah, all demographics.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I feel that I like that, I get excited by that, is because it gives me someone to look at and identify with, because like seeing someone on screen or in a story that's similar to you, that looks kind of like you can look at them and empathize with them and feel like that they might represent you in some way, like you can look up to them, especially when you're younger. You can look up to these people on screen and be like, I can do that. I can be what I want, because you see these people on screen doing what your dream, doing what you want.
I know this is a bit about women as opposed to race, but I think you could apply it to all the minority demographics. Mm-hmm. I heard once, girls are born being told what they can't do. Mm-hmm. It's so they have to try to overcome that when they become women. Mm-hmm. Something like that. I'm botching it. Mm-hmm. I was just trying to help.
Thank you. Sorry, this is another bit.
I was just going to say, you can bring up examples if you'd like.
Well, I was going to say that, did you know that there is a thing called the dream gap? Little girls don't even aspire as high as little boys. Like, if you go and ask little girls what they want to be, they tend to already in their mind strike out options for themselves. Say, no, I can't do that. I can't be that. And it's not that way for little boys.
Oh, and that's also true for different ethnicities. Like,
that's true.
Imagine, well, okay, I don't have to imagine this because I've heard this from actual African American people, where they would aspire to be like superheroes and stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But then they were limited in the options they could choose because almost all of them are Caucasian. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've heard specifically, I think his name, I'm not a big comic fan, but I think his name was Miles Morales from Spider-Man, who was the first African-American Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. I think that's correct. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, viewers. But that inspired people. Mm-hmm. Spider-Man also has always been a really top choice amongst non-Caucasian youth because he's completely masked, so anyone of any ethnicity can pretend to be him.
Mm-hmm. I think also Black Panther is great for African American children.
Yeah, I mean,
because it gives them superheroes and princesses and generals. Like, the only princess they had before Shuri was Tiana.
Right, which we talked about. The only problem, though, is aspiring to be a princess is a pretty low bar.
Well, yeah, but come on. It's little girls. Little girls want to see themselves as princesses.
No, but think about it. Think about the message that sends, really. Like, oh, I want to be a princess. I want to be born into wealth and do nothing with it. Or, I want to be a superhero. I want to be a criminal vigilante, but at least I'll be doing what's right, even if the system doesn't agree with me. Imagine the message that sends. I mean, that teaches people who look up to superheroes that there is a right and wrong, and that the law does not necessarily reflect that.
Yeah, you're right.
We should have more female superheroes.
Yeah, that's true. I completely agree with you there.
Yeah, because we got Black Panther, but what's the female one we got? Wonder Woman, and that's it. And sure, yeah, Wonder Woman's great, but we need more than that. Where's Black Widow at? Honestly, I don't even want Black Widow. You know why? Scarlett Johansson. I pass on her.
Fair enough. Shuri should become the next Black Panther.
I think she will, actually.
Well, I mean, that's the logical progression, but there's always the chance that they're just going to retcon all the deaths and, like, save everyone.
That's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think the next one is going to be Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
Which, again, there's two Captain Marvels. One of them's a man, one of them's a woman. But we're getting a movie about the woman one. Mm-hmm. Because there's a different version of the character owned by both DC and Marvel.
Yep. Also, there's this thing in media where you can't have more than one marginalized identity. If you're African American, then you have to be a straight cis person.
Oh yeah, that's what we were talking about, like with the Fallout ones, for example, with the exception of that one side character Cross that we talked about.
Yeah, like if you're a woman, you can't be of color. You know?
Exactly. You either, like, we talked about this in 4 Players featuring the girl. You have the one girl, you have the one ethnic minority, and then 2 Caucasian men. That's your 4-player group. Name me a game that doesn't do that. Well, I mean, we named a few, but still, almost all of them do.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
And for any of the fans of Call of Duty Zombies out there, look at those player characters. Can I go off on a bit with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I was a big fan of Call of Duty Zombies back in the day. They release one level at a time with a bit of backstory. It's extremely overpriced, and they lied. For example, Call of Duty Zombies just came out with a new game in Call of Duty Black Ops 4. The company lied because they said that Black Ops 3 was going to be the end. It wasn't. But hey, I guess the money was too good.
Of course.
So anyway, just to wrap things up, in the original games, you play as 4 soldiers from different wars of World War II, or different sides of World War II. Mm-hmm. So they're all men. They don't even have a single woman, right? Mm-hmm. But they're all Caucasian except for the Japanese man, the ethnic minority. Mm-hmm. Then you have the level Call of the Dead, which has horror movie actors. You got Michael Rooker from The Walking Dead, Caucasian man. Mm-hmm. Robert Englund from Nightmare on Elm Street, Caucasian man. Sarah Michelle Gellar from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the woman, and then Danny Trejo, the ethnic minority.
Yeah.
And then they had that one level Shadows of Evil in 1940s where they had 3 Caucasian men and then 1 woman, not even an ethnic minority there, because hey, it was Chicago in the 1940s. There were only Caucasian people there. Haven't you watched the movies? I'm being facetious.
Yeah.
Because, we talked about how genuinely people, like, this is the problem with media representation, that people think that because we were problematic in our representation, we only showed Caucasian men with maybe some women, right? Mm-hmm. Then, 30 years later, we look back at the past, we have nostalgia as a society for that time, and we look at the media and we're like, there were no African American people then. There were no Asian people, no Native Americans.
Which is ridiculous.
Exactly. And it's to the point where in Europe, like, they legitimately don't think that there were minorities there, even though there's plenty of evidence otherwise. And the same's even true, like, right now. Like in Chicago in the 1940s, the developers of this game and anyone who would have argued that point believes that there were only Caucasian people, at least in such a majority to justify the whitewashing.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. And it's always such a big problem whenever they try to represent the past, and then they're just like, oh, yay, we can whitewash as much as we want, because of course in the past, as other minorities just wouldn't exist. Or wouldn't be around. Like, oh, we're just like they're just servants and crap. Like, we don't have to show them because they weren't important enough to be in.
Even if that was true, that speaks to even more problems. Like, if you live in Oregon or Washington State in the United States, you can probably look back at your past and be like, look, we weren't racist. There weren't even non-Caucasian people here. There were no African Americans here. And the entire time that I've been alive, that my father's been alive, that my grandmother's been alive, we haven't had to deal with any of them. And you go, yeah, that's because Oregon was founded on a white supremacist constitution that made it illegal to be African American.
Wow.
It's not an accident that you didn't meet them. And it's not an accident that, like, okay, I'm going to switch races that I'm talking about to Native American. Mm-hmm. And it's not an accident that you didn't meet them because your country genocided them.
Yeah. It's terrible. So awful.
I know we're going on so many tangents, but these are the problems, you know? Like, it misrepresents history because, yes, it's art. Yes, it's media. But we've talked about how important those things are. And if you misrepresent them during the time period in which they are made or they represent, it distorts people's notions of history. And we live in a society where people just, quite frankly, don't give a crap about fact-checking.
Mm-hmm. I was going to mention, one of the reasons why I love Hamilton is that they decided to completely throw that out, and like almost every cast member is a person of color. Well, like not almost every, but like almost the entire main cast.
I think that's interesting because if it was done the other way around, it'd be offensive, right? Mm-hmm. And so, you know, some racist people might be like, oh, why are they able to... Okay, I wanted to say something, but I'm worried it's offensive. Whitewashing is okay to say, right?
Yeah.
Is the opposite an offensive term?
I would say that's not even a term that really exists.
Yeah, it's not a real thing. I just didn't know if there's a term for it, because there's many terms for things that don't exist. Okay, but like some type of, you know, bleep washing, just in case it is an offensive term.
Yeah.
That's not a thing, though.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason... So some of those racist people might be like, why is that okay when if I do it, it's not? Because you're Caucasian. You can't do that. They are just dressing up as Caucasian, but they're not even like, they're not actually painting their faces or anything. They're just dressing as historical characters that are important to America who happen to be Caucasian. And while that may not work to you, you could love Obama and just want to dress up as Obama, but that could be problematic considering the power structure. Yeah. And for this with Hamilton, it's reversed. This is a minority group of people, right? Mm-hmm. That are trying to dress up as characters that are of the group that has a power structure, the Caucasian people.
Yeah, and honestly, obviously you probably could say that the majority of them are white, but Alexander Hamilton himself was mixed race.
Yeah, and a Puerto Rican man played him.
Yeah.
Because Alexander Hamilton lived in Puerto Rico, he's Puerto Rican, right?
No, he's not Puerto Rican. He's
Caribbean.
Yeah, he's from somewhere in the Caribbean.
Okay.
And
well, close, I guess?
He's mixed race because his father was a Scotsman, so a white man, and his mother was Caribbean.
I had no idea before watching or listening to Hamilton or talking to you about that, Alexander Hamilton in the United States was not Caucasian.
Yeah, he was an immigrant.
And I mean, you know, technically President Obama was half African American, half Caucasian, right? Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately in America, we haven't really gone past the one drop principle, which was a racist philosophy during slavery and then the civil rights movement, where if you were any percentage African American, you're just completely African American. Mm-hmm. So that's why Obama was considered African American, even though he's technically half and half. Mm-hmm. Biracial is the proper term. Mm-hmm. So if Obama could be considered that, I think it's fair to call Hamilton Caribbean.
And that's really because he actually faced a form of racism from John
Adams.
John Adams. He literally
John Adams fired him for that, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is an offensive term, but they say it in the musical.
It's an offensive term. Don't say it.
All right, but yeah, John Adams calls Hamilton a slur.
Yep.
For Caribbean people.
When he fires him.
Yes.
Like, he literally just fired him for racist reasons.
Yep.
Again, this is why media is so important. You learn new things. And you may not know Alexander Hamilton wasn't a pure Caucasian like the rest of the founding fathers. And the reason is he was literally whitewashed in all depictions of him.
I would not be surprised to learn that all depictions of him made his skin lighter, because in the Caribbean, you can get any shade of skin from like a lighter tan to like really dark in the Caribbean. Yeah. So his mother could have been like really dark, and you would never know.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh.
Sorry.
Well, we were talking about Hamilton was whitewashed.
Yeah, before that. What were we talking about before that?
His mixed race?
I forgot. Okay, well, I'm just going to transition to another piece of media.
Yeah.
Welcome to Night Vale that we love? Mm-hmm. We were actually talking about this last night, but I thought it'd be a good thing to bring up to our listeners.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Night Vale has a problematic depiction of race. This is actually really surprising considering the fact that the piece of media tries very hard to be progressive. The town of Night Vale, despite being in what seems to be Nevada, is very ethnically diverse. Mm-hmm. There's Caucasian people, Native American people, African American people, Middle Eastern American people, which also have it really tough in America. I know we haven't really talked about them very much, but the whole Muslim ban, and it's just so much racism going around. Mm-hmm. Also, not all Middle Eastern people are Muslim. Why don't people get that?
Because people are stupid.
Thank you, Kira. Anyway, there's a lot of diversity, and welcome to Night Vale. The main character, the host of the show, is Cecil Palmer, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people assume, because we don't really know what he looks like, because the entire thing is based in audio, right?
Yeah, and they purposefully avoid giving him descriptions.
Oh, well, of mostly anything, because it's a very Lovecraftian kind of thing.
Yeah, and they may give descriptors, but specifically they have avoided giving any details about what Cecil looks like.
So a lot of people assume he's Caucasian because his voice actor, Cecil Baldwin, is Caucasian.
Yeah, and they also often give him blonde hair.
Which doesn't make sense because the actor is bald. But they assume he's Caucasian, right? Mm-hmm. However, in one of the episodes of Night Vale, and this is a spoiler, it's revealed that Cecil became the radio host prior to the 1700s, maybe even 1400s, it depends. Mm. Well, maybe, 1700s more likely. Because he was already the host of the radio station, which may not have been actual radio, but some type of like dark magic, when the first Caucasian settlers arrived in Night Vale. Mm-hmm. He was on the radio saying, like, in news today, we got these new people here. And it's explicitly stated at some point that prior to the Caucasian settlers, only indigenous people lived. It's also mentioned that before the indigenous people there were the beings that watched, but we'll set that aside. Mm-hmm. So this means Cecil has to be an indigenous person in Night Vale. I mean, also centuries old, but still. It means...
We'll just gloss over that.
A lot of people in Night Vale are centuries old, but that means that he has to be Native American.
Yeah, he has to have been one of the natives to the area.
But he's played by a Caucasian person. So either we have some dressing up as a race for acting, or we have whitewashing.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
those if you're the only two options.
Yeah, either the character is Native American, but the actor is not, or the actor's Caucasian and the character is magically Caucasian.
Somehow.
So yeah, it's either dressing up as a race, or whitewashing. And I find that very upsetting. And it's their own fault. They wrote that into the story. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to, like, it's like, twist, reveal. We're racist. I mean, okay, I don't think the creators are racist. I think this was a mistake because normally they're progressive, but still it's there. And he's the main character, so I can't help but think about that almost all the time when listening to the show.
Yeah.
Anyway, we got to wrap things up now. We've gone on for very long talking about racial representation. I like that we covered a bunch of different topics.
Yeah, I like that too.
This was a very general overview of race. Speaking of races, election races. See what I did there?
That's a good one.
In the United States of America, it should be obvious to most of you listening that there's an election coming up next Tuesday. We've just illustrated all of the problems and how racist America is. I understand how broken the election system is, how it's completely designed to minimize your participation. But it's not a zero effect. There is something, even if it is minimal. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage anyone listening, if you're in America and you're old enough, go vote. Because that's the only way you're going to be able to really change people from, well, maybe it's not the only way. There's other ways too, but it's a very existy way.
It's one right now. It's the best you can do. It's the most important thing you can do right now, because
it is a very important thing, I think.
Yeah.
Despite how minimal your effect is, but still, it's something, and only if enough people can get together. If like 33% of this chart was Caucasian, you need the other 66% to be able to group up together to be able to try to make this country less racist and to catch up with all the other countries around the world. I know many other countries are suffering, but there's so many countries that are doing better than we are.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Go vote.
Tuesday.
Yes,
November
Tuesday.
6th. Mm-hmm. And thank you for listening to the podcast. And we should have Nuka-Cola soon. Mm-hmm. Bye.
Bye.